It is easily the most mysterious and least understood of all Earth's continents in the 21st century. So poorly understood it is. Still, that most people alive today don't even really have a solid grasp about Antarctica's true size or shape, something which probably is not really helped by our perception of Antarctica as this sprawling, misshapen blob that we always see stretching across the bottom of our two-dimensional maps, if it's even displayed on the map at all, when in reality Antarctica is the world's fifth largest continent, exceeding the sizes of Australia and Europe, and being closer in size to South America than any other continent. The true scale of Antarctica can be realized when it overlays on top of a more familiar continent to me, such as North America. Antarctica is a lot bigger than the continental 48 US states. The distance from the Antarctic Peninsula to the other side of the continent is as far as the Canadian Arctic Islands are from Mexico. On top of Europe, Antarctica would stretch from the far northern reaches of Norway and Finland down to Iran and Iraq in the southeast and well past Ireland into the mid-Atlantic to the west. It's a genuinely massive place, and it's also almost completely empty and absent from human life. The human population of Antarctica ranges from as many as 4,000 people during the warmer Antarctic summer months to as few as only 1,000 people during the long, dark and savagely cold Antarctic winters, when the darkness of night has swallowed the whole continent for continuous months and the temperature drops to below 34 degrees C throughout the continent. Still, it is not only the excessively harsh weather of Antarctica that maintains its population at the low figure. It is also an insanely remote place that is really hard to get yourself towards, being positioned at the bottom of the globe. And the closest important human settlement to the continent USUA lies in far southern Argentina, which, despite this proximity, is still approximately a th 000 km from the tip of the Antarctic Peninsula. The proximity, however, the distance between USUA and Antarctica is separated by the infamous Drake Passage, an expanse of water that is arguably the roughest and most dangerous part of the world's ocean. Here at the bottom of the civilizational world between the continents, the Southern and Pacific Oceans flow unobstructed into the Atlantic, representing the only location in the Southern Hemisphere where winds and ocean currents can each flow around the entire world without any obstruction from land, allowing them to violently whip around the world continually and keep picking up speed and strength as they go. This, combined with a collision of warmer water in the north and colder water in the south, result in powerful the waves in Drake Passage, which can climb up to almost 20 m or 65 feet high during extreme weather scenarios. With the rough conditions through the Drake Passage and the huge distances between Antarctica and the other nearby continents of Africa and Australia, it's little wonder that human eyes most probably never even saw the frozen continent at all until as recently as the 19th century, when a Russian ship made the first ever recorded discovery of Antarctica in 1820. Even today, more than 2.5 centuries later, we still understand precious little about this isolated continent, especially anything about what's possibly beneath the titanic Antarctic ice sheet. More than 98% of the Antarctic continent's surface, leaving very few exposed areas of land above the ice that we can actually observe with our own eyes. On average across the entire continent, the Antarctic ice sheet stretches more than 2 kilometers thick from the surface we can observe down to the surface of the actual continental landmass. But at the thickest points, the ice on Antarctica can reach upwards of nearly 5 km thick, which is nearly as thick as 6 Burj Khalifas in Dubai, the world's tallest building, all stacked on top of each other. The fact that this is a reason 61% of all the freshwater on the planet is locked away in Antarctica's ice sheet is just one such reason that, if the entire thing were to melt its way into its liquid form, it would likely contribute eventually to global sea level rise by roughly 60 m, which would be catastrophically devastating and lead to the complete destruction of Florida and much of the US Gulf and East coasts. The Antarctic ice sheet is so dense and inaccessible that it's generally agreed we have more knowledge about the surface of faraway worlds like Mars today than what's actually beneath the Antarctic ice sheet on the real surface of Antarctica, rather than drilling through kilometers of ice to see what's beneath it. The main way that we've been able to sort of visualize what's beneath the ice on the continent is by flying planes over it and shooting radio waves down into the ice below, then analyze how the waves echo back up to the plane, a process that's known as radio echo sounding. The Antarctic continent is of course a much larger place than even Europe is, so flying planes doing this technique over the whole continent would be a brutally painstaking, expensive and time-consuming process. As it stands now, we only have an extremely rough idea of what lies beneath the frozen continent based on the few radio echo sounding flights we've done across it so far. It's estimated that over 90% of the continent beneath the ice remains unmapped and unknown, but the small amount of information that we do already know about what's beneath the world's largest ice sheet on the world's most mysterious continent is already incredibly fascinating. For one, we already know that Antarctica is not really a single block of land beneath the ice, as it appears to us above the ice. If all of the continent's ice were to melt or get removed, what would be revealed would be the actual shape of the Antarctic continent. Whereas to us what we at present know as the Antarctic Peninsula in reality would emerge as a completely separate archipelago of mountainous islands that has sometimes been referred to as Lesser Antarctica. Whereas the rest of the continent, most of the Greater Antarctica, would remain above the ocean surface and be roughly the same size as Australia. Each of these two dissimilar halves of Antarctica, one archipelago each, one continental, would become this way due to their radically different geologies and histories. The area of Greater Antarctica, or the eastern side of the continent, is known to consist of more ancient igneous and metamorphic rocks, while the more archipelago each Lesser Antarctica is much younger and made up of sedimentary and volume volcanic rocks instead. Fascinatingly, Lesser Antarctica pertains to the Great Pacific Ring of Fire, a continuous belt of tectonic fault lines and active volcanoes that spans almost the entire perimeter of the Pacific Ocean, which has existed for about the past 35 million years. Because of this, most of the archipelagos and islands that exist in Lesser Antarctica are volcanic in nature despite their appearances of frozen ice and glaciers on top of them. Mount Erebus far to the east in Antarctica is the highest active volcano on the continent and also the southernmost active volcano on the planet. It also contains a lake of molten lava within its inner summit crater, which has been observable since the 1970s. And last erupted only a few years ago in 2020. The average yearly temperature around where Mount Erebus is located remains around 7 degrees Celsius, and during the Antarctic winter months between April and September, the temperature will never climb above 20 C, and it will sink to as low as 62 degrees Celsius in August, cold enough to cause frostbite to exposed skin within minutes or to instantly freeze water. If you were to pour out a bowl of hot water in the air at these temperatures, it would turn to snow before it even hit the ground. This is an environment that is incredibly inhospitable to life, in which you wouldn't expect to find very much of it. And yet, just beneath the surface of Mount Erebus is an entire new world that we have only begun to appreciate. How decades and centuries of hot steam off the Mount Erebus volcano have carved out a network of tunnels through the ice beneath the mountain. Within these subvolcanic ice's caves, the temperatures are known to reach as high as 25 degrees Celsius or about 77 F. It's warm enough for you or me to hang out down there in a t-shirt and shorts and be comfortable doing it, despite being in the middle of Antarctica. That means the Antarctic subvolcanic cave systems could be warm enough to host all kinds of life that we may not even be aware of. Back in 2017, a team led by the Australian National University obtained a sample of the soil within one of these cave systems beneath Mount Erebus. And after analyzing its composition, they found the soil contained DNA traces of things like algae and mosses, but most tantalizing of all, DNA traces of small animals that might be living down there too, in a sub-Antarctic oasis of life. Most of these animal-rated DNA traces they found were similar to species that we already know of living up on the surface, but not all of them. Some of these traces could not be linked to species we already know about, but were most closely related to arthropod species, such as shrimp, centipedes, or spiders. These warm caves beneath Mount Erebus, that remain unknown to mankind indeed. There are 15 other active or semi-active volcanoes across Antarctica that could equally contain similar warm steam-carved tunnels and caves beneath them all. Also, in other words, more than a dozen such oasis-like ecosystems might exist beneath the ice of Antarctica, which we presently know virtually nothing about. Planes flying radio echo sounding data over Antarctica have revealed a vast landscape beneath the ice of rolling valleys, riverbeds, and hills, similar in many respects to the landscape that is commonplace elsewhere on Earth, but frozen in time and locked beneath a column of ice. One of the most interesting geographic features on the continent, that until recently, discovered in 2019, but what we now know is the deepest canyon anywhere on Earth's land surface. A canyon that if it wasn't hidden by the ice above it would put America's Grand Canyon to shame, lies within Greater Antarctica beneath the Denman Glacier. This canyon that we now understand to plunge 3.5 kilometers deep beneath exists. The sea level, which just is insanely deep. For reference, this canyon in Antarctica sinks to a depth that is roughly the same as the average depth of the Atlantic Ocean, and it is roughly half as deep as Mount Everest is tall. The deepest point below sea level on exposed land on the planet is the shoreline. Around the Dead Sea between Jordan, Israel and the West Bank, and it only sinks to as low as 413 meters beneath sea level. This canyon in Antarctica sinks nearly 8.5 times deeper than that. Only in the oceans do canyons dip deeper below the surface, and we didn't even know about this super deep canyon on Antarctica until 2019 because it's been covered up by kilometers worth of ice for millions of years now. Imagine what it would be like looking out at this canyon, without all the ice obscuring it.